Blessings. Today my lecture is about the various protectors of Yosemite National Park. What began as a clash between settlers and Indians in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California in the 19th century became a catalyst for creating a new and unique system of protecting not only Yosemite, but national parks, monuments, and forests in the United States and eventually around the world. Long before the Mariposa Battalion tracked down and chased the marauding Yosemite Indians into the valley in 1851, various Indian tribes had inhabited this amazing natural wonderland. There are no records of these peoples, so the recorded history of Yosemite begins with the Yosemites. The first known inhabitants of Yosemite were the southern Miwok Indian tribe called the Awanichi. Living in relative peace, they kept entry into the valley hidden for many years. Unfortunately, the discovery of gold in California in 1849 brought miners eager for fame and fortune. As miners and settlers encroached further upon Indian lands, clashes and skirmishes occurred. Yosemite Valley was a safe haven for the Awanichi, and they were experts at utilizing the land to the best of its ability. They conducted annual controlled burning of the meadowlands to produce greater harvest, and burns enabled new forest growth. Their efforts were conservationism. The Awanichi could be considered the first protectors of Yosemite. Although the discovery of Yosemite led to the eventual expulsion of the Awanichi, Yosemite National Park and the Yosemite Conservancy continue to document the history of this people. The first reconstructed Indian village was built in 1931. Now an authentic Awanichi village is located behind the visitor center, complete with a working roundhouse and chuckas. The roundhouse is used for religious ceremonies and is off limits to tourists. The chuckas are acorn granaries. Back to the discovery of Yosemite. The 1850 Indian raids in Mariposa and Fresno led to the creation of the Mariposa Battalion in 1851. Trading Post owner James Savage employed many domesticated Indians and learned their language. Appointed commander of the battalion, he tracked the Yosemites and discovered a natural wonderland that almost defied description. Dr. Lafayette Houghton Bunnell was assigned to the battalion, and he documented the sites, drew pictures, made accurate descriptions of the marvels and the Indians, and ultimately was credited with naming most of the features of the park. The Yosemites called themselves the Uzumati, or grizzly bears, but Dr. Bunnell interpreted that as Yosemite. Dr. Bunnell's descriptions appeared in various publications like James Hutchings' California Magazine and brought attention to Yosemite. Dr. Bunnell is considered very important to Yosemite's history and the conservation movement. In 1925, the California Medical Association honored him with a plaque still affixed to a boulder in Bridal Veil Meadow. Unregulated tourism and destructive land practices led Californians to propose a unique solution, setting aside and protecting Yosemite for future generations. Budding conservationists persuaded Senator John Conness to sponsor the congressional bill to protect Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Big Tree Grove from commercialism and destruction. In the middle of the Civil War, on June 30th, 1864, President Lincoln signed the Yosemite Grant and inadvertently initiated the National Park System. California's Board of Yosemite Commissioners was tasked with protecting the grant. Commissioner and famed architect Frederick Law Olmsted conducted a preliminary report in 1865 outlining how best to preserve the park while controlling human impact. Commissioner and geologist J.D. Whitney wrote one of the first Yosemite guidebooks in 1869. Commissioner Galen Clark was appointed the first guardian of Yosemite in 1866. Magazine owner, editor, and business entrepreneur James Hutchings used Bunnell's first-hand accounts to promote tourism for Yosemite, and his articles intrigued John Muir, who made his first trip to Yosemite in 1868. Muir is known as the father of the national parks and was an early advocate for preserving America's wilderness areas, with Yosemite his top priority. In 1880, Hutchings served as guardian of Yosemite. When he died in 1902, he was buried in the Yosemite Cemetery. By 1889, Galen Clark was again appointed guardian of Yosemite. Known as the discoverer of the Mariposa Grove of giant sequoia trees, he served a total of 24 years protecting Yosemite and was instrumental in gaining legislation to protect Yosemite as a national park. His cabin is still intact in the Mariposa Big Tree Grove. On October 1st, 1890, Yosemite National Park was created and signed into law by President Benjamin Harrison. Galen Clark and John Muir were the loudest voices in the conservation movement to promote this legislation. The U.S. Army Cavalry was assigned park protection duties in 1891. It was headquartered in Wawona near the Mariposa Big Tree Grove to patrol and protect the park. The Sierra Club was created as a private conservationist organization in 1892 and originally focused on preserving and protecting the park from opportunists. Muir would spend the rest of his life as chief protector of Yosemite, hiking the Sierra Nevada mountains in solitude and authoring many books pertaining to Yosemite. A plaque commemorating the John Muir Cabin site in Yosemite Valley was placed in 1925. In 1898, the first civilian park ranger was appointed and also served as a guide and guard in 1903 when President Theodore Roosevelt visited the park with Muir. Muir convinced President Roosevelt that Yosemite National Park needed to include the original Yosemite grant that was still under the authority of the state of California. In 1905, Yosemite lost 430 acres due to the Hetch Hetchy Valley being flooded to provide water for San Francisco. Roosevelt's trip to Yosemite allowed California to reseed the Yosemite grant in 1906 back to the United States and brought the entire parklands under federal protection. The U.S. Army and civilian rangers managed the park. In 1915, Stephen Mather and conservationist Horace Albright co-managed the national parks and monuments. Mather was responsible for promoting a unified National Parks Agency, and the National Park Service Act was created in 1916. Mather was named first National Park Service Director in 1916 and served until 1929. He turned the NPS into a professional civil service organization and increased the number of parks and national monuments. In 1921, the first Yosemite Museum installation began and resulted in the formation of the first philanthropic organization solely dedicated to the preservation of Yosemite National Park. Organized in 1923, the Yosemite Museum Association was established. It managed museum funds, partnered with the NPS, interpretive programs, trained naturalists, produced art and theater programs, and published books. Just as the Yosemite grant set in motion the national park system, the Yosemite Museum Association made precedent by having private sector partners work with NPS managers to protect and preserve public lands. In 1926, the Yosemite Museum opened to the public, and by 1930, the live Indian exhibit opened at the Yosemite Museum. In 1933, 5 civilian Conservation Corps camps were established in the park to work with the Civil Works Administration and the Public Works Administration for construction and resource management programs in the park. Established by FDR, approximately 250,000 unemployed men worked on various public lands. By 1947, meadow and vista restoration projects were initiated to return wilderness areas back to natural condition while allowing park visitors to enjoy them. Today, many valley meadows are crisscrossed with wooden paths suspended over the delicate meadows. In 2022, a new and improved visitor center is under construction and is scheduled for completion for 2023. The Glacier Point Firefall program, originally instituted in 1872, where burning embers were nightly dumped over the top of Glacier Point and appeared as a glowing waterfall, was discontinued and restarted many times over the years. This was not beneficial to the environment and was permanently discontinued in 1968. The free Valley Shuttle service was initiated in 1970 to reduce valley vehicle traffic, and the road system was changed to one-way roads to discourage excessive vehicle traffic and reduce air pollution. In 1972, the Yosemite Village parking plaza was converted to a non-vehicular mall and further reduced traffic congestion. Not long afterwards, the only gas station located in Yosemite Valley was removed to discourage driving in the valley. People are now encouraged to bike, hike, or shuttle, and to leave their vehicles parked during their park stay. Another philanthropic organization unique to Yosemite was the Yosemite Institute, organized in 1971. This nonprofit organization continues to provide environmental education. In 1973, the Indian Village Ceremonial Roundhouse was built. It was replaced in 1992 and continues to be used for religious purposes today. The roundhouse was the center and focal point of all village activity. This project was a cooperative effort of the NPS, the Yosemite Conservancy, the Youth Conservation Corps, and the Indian Council of Maricopa County. In 2019, a grant from the Yosemite Conservancy allowed construction of the much larger Wahoga Roundhouse, located near Camp 4, to begin. It will be used by various tribal members for cultural and spiritual ceremonies. In 1976, the California Conservation Corps was established by Governor Jerry Brown. The oldest and largest conservation corps in the United States has partnered with the Yosemite Conservancy for over 40 years to perform natural resource work in Yosemite. Similar to the CCC, workers plant trees, maintain trails and fish habitats, and conserve energy. Yosemite gained worldwide prestige in 1984 when it was designated a World Heritage Site. As the sacred homeland of many California Indian tribes and groups, World Heritage status recognizes generations of American Indian land management. In 1985, the Yosemite Museum Association reorganized as the Yosemite Association and included a volunteer program, wilderness operations, and various wilderness and wildlife restoration programs, like the reintroduction of bighorn sheep to Tioga Pass in 2015. In 1988, the Yosemite Fund was created as a fundraising organization for park projects and preservation efforts. By 2010, the Yosemite Fund and the Yosemite Association merged to form the Yosemite Conservancy. It is solely devoted to protecting and preserving Yosemite and celebrates nearly 100 years of partnership from the various iterations of this organization that has funded over 600 projects, utilizing $119 million in grant funding. From the Miwok-Awanichi to the Yosemite Grant, from the Yosemite National Park Act to the creation of the National Park Service, from individual guardians to the U.S. Cavalry to philanthropic and environmental organizations, Yosemite National Park has a long heritage of preservation and protection.